May 21, 1982. The South Atlantic. Far below the clouds, British warships were moving through a narrow stretch of water surrounded by rugged hills. Thousands of soldiers were coming ashore. Landing craft crossed the water. Helicopters roared overhead. For the first time since the war had begun, British troops were establishing a major foothold on the Falkland Islands. But there was something the men on those ships could not see. Hundreds of miles away, engines were starting. Pilots were climbing into their aircraft. Bombs were being loaded. And on the mainland of Argentina, the order had been given: attack. The aircraft chosen for the mission were A-4 Skyhawks, small, fast, and heavily loaded with bombs. Their destination was San Carlos water. Their targets were the British ships. And somewhere between the Argentine mainland and the fleet stood the aircraft that had become the nightmare of Argentina. Pilots, the British Sea Harrier. The Skyhawks were coming to hunt ships. The Harriers were waiting to hunt them, and neither side knew how the next few hours would end. The Falkland Islands were thousands of miles from Britain. For decades, the remote islands had been administered by Britain, but Argentina claimed sovereignty over them. On April 2, 1982, Argentine forces invaded. Britain responded almost immediately. A naval task force was assembled and sent south. Aircraft carriers, destroyers, frigates, troop ships, submarines, and thousands of soldiers. But Britain had a problem. The Falklands were incredibly far away. There would be no large network of British air bases waiting for them. The aircraft carriers would have to provide much of the air power. And aboard those carriers was an aircraft that had never been tested in a war quite like this: the Sea Harrier. It was not the fastest fighter in the world. It could not simply fly hundreds of miles from a land base, fight a battle, and return home with ease. Instead, it had been designed to operate from ships. Its ability to take off and land from relatively short decks made it perfectly suited to the British task force. But nobody knew whether it could actually protect a fleet against a determined enemy. That question would soon be answered. On the other side of the battlefield, Argentine pilots were preparing for war. Among the most important aircraft in their arsenal was the Douglas A-4 Skyhawk. The Skyhawk was a small attack aircraft originally designed for the United States Navy. It wasn't built to be beautiful. It wasn't built to carry the most weapons. It was built to do one thing extremely well: get close to a target, drop its bombs, and get away. The Argentine pilots understood their aircraft. They knew its strengths. They knew its weaknesses, and most importantly, they knew the geography. Their bases were on the Argentine mainland. The British fleet was thousands of miles from Britain, but much closer to Argentina. That gave Argentina a major advantage. The Skyhawks could launch from mainland bases and fly toward the islands. But there was a problem: fuel. The pilots had to fly enormous distances. Every minute spent searching for British ships consumed precious fuel. Every turn cost more. Every second spent fighting could mean the difference between reaching home and falling into the ocean. So the Argentine pilots had developed a dangerous method: fly low, very low. May 21st. At San Carlos water, British troops were landing. The operation was enormous. Ships crowded the water. Soldiers moved onto the beaches. Equipment was unloaded. Commanders tried to organize the invasion while knowing that Argentine aircraft could appear at any moment. Then the warning came: aircraft approaching. The British defenses went on alert. Somewhere beyond the surrounding hills, Argentine pilots were flying toward them. The Skyhawks were staying close to the surface. At that altitude, the curvature of the Earth and the surrounding terrain could help hide them from radar. The pilots weren't interested in climbing high and announcing their presence. They wanted surprise. They wanted speed. and they wanted to reach the ships before the British fighters could intercept them. Inside one of those aircraft, the pilot would see almost nothing except ocean and sky. The cockpit would shake. The engine would scream behind him. The aircraft would be carrying hundreds of kilograms of bombs. And ahead was the British fleet. Then, suddenly, the coastline appeared. The Falklands. They had reached the battlefield. For the men aboard the British ships, the first sign of the attack was not always an aircraft. Sometimes it was a radar warning. Sometimes it was gunfire from another ship. Sometimes it was a tiny dot appearing over a hill. And then the dot became an aircraft. Then another. Then another. The Skyhawks were coming in fast. British anti-aircraft guns opened fire. Missiles streaked into the sky. Smoke filled the air. But the Argentine pilots kept flying. They were not trying to win a dogfight. They were trying to destroy ships. That meant they had to continue toward the target even while everything around them was trying to kill them. For the men aboard the ships, there was almost no time. A few seconds could decide whether a bomb struck the water or struck the ship. And above all of this, British Sea Harriers were searching.